this release, we allow you to bring your Copilot extension and finally run it in the Microsoft Cloud based on our Microsoft AI resources. As you approach this path on this journey, there's a couple of things which we would like you to be aware from practical perspective, and we'll cover some of those topics today. And I hope that by the end of this video, you'll have a good overview what you should start thinking of as you practically approaching that path. So we'll start with our basic introductory slide. We have a development tool for Copilot for a year now. They're very known and well used. But what's more important, this release, we finally give you the ability to run your extension in our Microsoft Cloud using our AI resources. I'm not going to cover billing part. We have a dedicated session for that. But from a development experience, what it means that you can take a latest sandbox environment, you can upload your 5-star Copilot extension, and it just magically run. So you don't need to care about where is your LLM models, how is it deployed, availability, and things like that. It just kind of magically runs on your behalf. We don't have any special programs anymore, which we used to call before Microsoft Managed AI Resources. And of course, we are looking forward to see what you're going to build with all that. The reason why it's so important and it's so cool, because finally you and us have a same framework and infrastructure. How do we build our Copilot experiences? So think about your extension as any other Microsoft extension, which goes through our AI toolkit, which behind the scene consumes some cloud Copilot services, which finally give you access to some of our large language models. And it's not only application features. In fact, all of our platform fork, all of our agentic frameworks, they're all leveraging the same infrastructure from availability perspective, from resources consumption perspective. So it's just great that you and us finally share the same toolset how to build Copilot experiences. Okay, let's become a little bit more concrete. What do we mean by that, and what is available for you as a partner as of today? We talk all about as of time of this recording, as of this wave, and in the future it'll probably evolve. If you go to OpenAI website, you have so many models available for you. And as a part of our DevTools today, we give you access to GPT-4o and GPT-4o Mini. It's a flagship models. You can use some of them for deep reasoning. You have some more fast, some smaller. And actually, we're going to cover in which cases can you use which one. But that's your building blocks, what you have access to today. If you go through our IL abstraction layer, we try to keep it simple. We give you Azure OpenAI deployments. You can just say, hey, give me latest GPT-4o Mini or 4o, and you just get access to them. So we're trying to abstract a lot of complexity, how we deal with different versions of these models on your behalf. The first question we're usually getting, but it's all good, but what about all REST models? If you just look for the last 2 months, Microsoft have a lot of announcement that DeepSeek R1 reasoning model coming to Azure Foundry. OpenAI released a number of O reasoning models. And can we get access to those? And the truth is, of course, the whole world is experimenting with those models right now. But before we, as a Business Central, can give you access to those models, we need to make sure that all over the world where we have our BC customers, and that's a lot in all Azure regions, you or we will have enough capacity of those models. And once we reach this point, so we can support you in a production, then of course we'll roll out more and more models as they come. But for now, you have a couple of them, which is great. So we want you to stick with those. Okay, we talked quickly about models. And of course, when you interact with models, you write your prompts. So the first question which could come to mind, what is a good prompt? I asked my Copilot this morning, as I was preparing for this talk, what is a good prompt? And a response I get, hello, Evgeny. A good prompt is something which is clear, specific, provide enough of instructions, and so on and so forth. And you want to provide even more details for given creative tasks. OK, let's try to roll with this definition and take a look on a real example of prompt. If you're watching this video, you can maybe pause it and go slowly yourself. But imagine for a second we have a small Copilot, which is your AI assistant, which primary function is to assist users drafting emails to confirm appointments and bookings. In this case, you have a number of guidelines that, hey, you want to confirm a booking in a special format, you want to start with greeting, you want to confirm time, type of work, you want to have in a special format, it should be grounded in some kind of real business data, in a professional tone, and things like that. And by the way, this is a real example from Microsoft Work from last summer. So imagine for a second we have a prompt like that. Having that prompt, your Copilot response could look something like that. Dear Peter, I hope this email finds you well. I'm writing to confirm that we have a booking with you scheduled on that time. We're going to do that type of work, which will take in that place. And if you have any questions, reach out. We're happy to assist you with that. And it's very, very important. In the end of that email, you have like a small link, like a maybe work order, something you can click and confirm that, yes, it's a booking or appointment. And you can maybe make some changes to that. So again, from a nice prompt, which so far follow our previous guidelines, we see a result of Copilot work with an email, which looks like that. So it was all great and working fine on Friday. And then over weekends, as of Monday, suddenly that feature, that prompt, start behave suddenly a little bit different. And the emails we start seeing look like that. Hi, I just want to confirm the appointment. Should you have any assistance, please reach out. I'm here to help. Regards, Evgeny Korovin. And of course, you still have this link, like in the bottom of an email, which you can kind of press and validate that, yes, it's a booking for you, and confirm it, and so forth and so on. So now I want you to make a pause and think about. So how come from response like that to response like that overnight? And if I will ask you to rate that confirmation email from 0 stars to 5 stars, what would be your rating? Many people would say, hey, well, obviously it's 0 stars, it's very bad, it's kind of completely dropped in accuracy and level of details. But the interesting news that actually it's not that bad. We will say it's like 3 out of 5. And what I mean by that, you still get an email, which still confirms the appointment, it still greets the user, it has a professional tone, it follows the structure, and it has a link where you can verify what needs to happen. I would even argue as an SMS, it can be a great email. Obviously there is a significant regression or lack of details, but from a prompt perspective, if you really carefully look at the instruction, it kind of works to what you ask it to do. It still regressed significantly, and I'll explain you what has happened. But the point is here, your prompt still works suddenly a little bit different, and which is not that different from large language model, will be very different for you as a user, because no doubt we just lost a lot of accuracy and quality in those responses. Now, the better news for us that in a real life it didn't happen, because we, as an engineering team who builds those features, invest a lot to our test automation. And we had a test which verify the expected outcome of those emails. So we had an opportunity to detect a change, update our prompts, and get back to original level of quality. And what has happened in this case actually is that we had a version update overnight. So models have versions. And even the same model, it usually can be another version because new versions can be faster or sometimes cheaper and so on and so forth. And because every model is not better, it's different, sometimes you can regress some of your prompts. So if I ask a question, what is a good prompt, not to Copilot, but some of my colleagues like Sam van Lieshout, who is our a staff engineer team, he will tell me, well, it's not that matter that much how good prompt is, styling-wise or precision-wise, but it's much more important that you have enough of test coverage so you can verify and make sure your prompts will work as we migrate through version of the model and from one models to another models. And this is something I want you kind of have as a takeaway as you start looking at the presentation, that The discussion what is a good prompt is a great discussion, and of course you want to follow latest guidelines and make it great, but it's much, much more important for practical considerations to make sure your prompts will continue to work. As we're going to update models and version of models, it's really, really critical to make sure your Copilot extension will still continue to work successfully in Microsoft Cloud. And of course, testing helps to have good prompts, as we just discussed. Models will upgrade with new features and new improvements. The new version may work differently. The new version doesn't mean it's better, it means it's different. And it's not necessarily mean it's backward compatible. Write your test from day zero. And we have a number of BC early sessions for this event talking about our test toolkit, our responsible AI principles. So go ahead and learn how you can write tests to protect your prompt regression, to have any good prompts. Super, 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 super important. Okay, we talked a little bit about models and what you have access to and why it's important to have a good prompts. But the next thing you have to address as you're trying to build your extension to run in our cloud is how you're going to deal with fabrications, which is super, super critical in Business Central domain. So let me give you an example of fabrications, what it's about, and what should we do with them. So let's say we have Anna, who is a user, and she asks a chat with Copilot a question: how do I reverse a production order credit memo? Now, before you even comment that those wording doesn't have any logical sense, because we don't have any something called production order credit memo, the Copilot will say, sure, you can definitely reverse a production order credit memo by going to this and do that, which is absolutely nonsense. But the reason why it behaves like that, because large language models train to respond statistically in the same way as the datasets they're trained on. And in our documentation, we have a lot of valid cases. For example, you can reverse a sales invoice by doing blah. You can reverse a purchase order by doing blah. So large language models just copy those type of response, if you will, because it's trying to be helpful, but it definitely lead to absolutely fabricated, hallucinated statements, which is not good for the user. And you can say, well, as a user, I can clearly see it's not good. But what about this example? So now we have a Bob who is asking a chat saying, hey, how do I release a sales order? And Copilot say, sure. To release a sales order, you go to the sales order page and you press release button and so on and so forth. What's interesting about this example is that actually is correct. If you go to that page, there is a button called release. However, at the time we would build that feature, we had absolutely no documentation which mentioned how to release sales orders. So this is the example which is very deceiving. The LLM gave you the right answer, but by pure chance, you basically flip a coin and it gives you some English words which turn out to be true, but it has absolutely no ground to come up with that statement. In fact, if it would say, I don't know, it would be much more appropriate result. So again, from giving you wrong answers to giving you deceiving answers. And this becomes even more interesting. So let's say you're building a Copilot for your customers, and you want to talk about inventory levels. And you can say, hey, do you have an inventory for a given product on a given place? And Copilot say, sure, of course we have enough. And then you click a link, and then it falls apart. Because, again, large language model, by definition, has absolutely no knowledge about your inventory levels and your product. And instead of just saying, I don't know, it's saying you something, and it's not good. The reason why it's happening, and this is super important to kind of understand and think about that, large language models always try to predict next words or tokens, and it always try to be helpful and finish the sentence. And instead of saying, I don't know, or admit lack of knowledge, it will try to continue the sentence to represent some statistical representation of sentences, which leads to deceiving answers. And that's super critical for our world, because we want our users take an action with trust. And maybe for creative domain, it's awesome, but for Business Central domains, dealing with fabrication is a huge deal. It's a priority number one, which we need to tackle. So now the question is, how are we going to tackle that? There's many ways and many techniques. The simplest technique which helps us as a Microsoft is the following. Always validate LLM response. So what do I mean by that? Imagine you build your prompt dialog, and imagine you have some prompt or you're asking LLM something. The first thing you need to do is to validate that the response you got from LLM is legit. There's many ways how you can do it. For example, if you ask about the distance or numbers or weather, you need to make sure that the response is talking about that. And if it's legit, you can continue your work, do some calculation, do some analysis, and initially, at some point, give the response to the user. But if it's not good, if it's not grounded, if you have a suspicion it's hallucinating or fabricating, you can as simply as try again. And sometimes you just say, try again, and it will work. Sometimes you need to provide much more instructions. But it's like a core idea. We never surface any LLM response from a system to the user unless we verified they're grounded and they're true. And now back to our what we allow you to do in our Microsoft Cloud with our models. You might use GPT-4o for a lot of reasoning, email classifications, conversation scoring to do the main work. And you might use 4o Mini as a cheaper, faster model to validate its responses. And this is like a very simple pattern, and I'll show you an example of it, but that's exactly how we build majority of our features today. Let's take a concrete example, and the easiest way to illustrate this idea is to back to our classic marketing text feature, which we all love. You can go to the product, and you can say, hey, try to generate for me marketing text. When you do that, you as a user have a number of requirements that you say, hey, I would like to generate a tagline, I want to have a small text paragraph. And the first thing we do behind the scene, before we show this text to the users, we will validate that those settings are held. Another example is the data. So imagine you have a product which have multiple physical dimensions or properties or qualities. When we generate marketing text, we are making sure that every number, if you will, like a size or width or depth, is actually coming from a database. So we don't want to have a marketing text where you have different dimensions, or you have a sales campaign and we give you like 1,000% discounts just because LM can. So we do work to validate that the final outcome of a generated marketing text will be what we call grounded or have the right data points in. And only if it has so, we show it to the user. Having that small technique just to validate LLM for this particular feature allows us to increase accuracy, meaning it works, from 60%, which is like every flip point, kind of coin time to time, to very, very big numbers. The work is not stopping here, but just by doing this simple technique, you get significant return on investment from something which AI to something, okay, now we can maybe take a dependency or seriously talk about that feature. Great stuff. It's not always as easy like that. I don't want to kind of downplay the level of complexity. For example, if you ask our chat about how can I do something in our documentation, like how can I do drop shipments? You have a kind of quite advanced machinery behind the scene. We try to go to Microsoft Learn, which is kind of trusted source of knowledge, retrieve all the articles, and we'll try to prepare for your question. From all the articles, kind of give you this nice overview to help you. However, we will never show it to you before we do what? Before we verify that the answer is grounded and that answer we prepare for you actually answering the initial question. And only if we are making sure it does that, we'll show you the answer, and otherwise we can show you some links, something else, and so on and so forth. Yes, we pay extra time to wait for verifications. Yes, maybe you need to wait extra 200 milliseconds, but we need to ensure you have this trust and verification mechanism. And in some cases, it's easier. In some cases, it's hard. But it's the same kind of fundamental idea. We verify what we ask for, and if we're sure, we proceed. If we don't sure, we do something else. We can clarify, but we need to approach the situation from day zero. Super important. Dealing with fabrication should be a number one priority as you consider to bring Copilot to your users, just to avoid lack of trust, frustration, bad reputation, brand damage, all these bad things. Always validate LLM responses, learn from us, from these sessions, from our base app examples. All above is essential for having good prompts. Just to have like a practice how you ground your prompts in a reality. Super, super important. Okay. We talked about fabrications, but the question is, how can we build copilots which can answer user questions which are grounded in data, so when we ask about inventory levels, we got a right and truthful response. And to do that, we can use tools. Tools is a really cool concept. I'll show you how it works, what it does, and what is the main intent for. And to maybe illustrate you the idea, I'm going to switch to ChatGPT and explain how ChatGPT works, and then show you how it's applied for Business Central. I'm going to ChatGPT, and I'll show you first how it works with tools and without tools. So first of all, I'm going to ask a question. Who is the Prime Minister of Canada? And I specifically given instructions, don't use tools, and I press Go button. So what's happening now, the large language model replying on my question based on the knowledge it has, and the time when it was trained. Obviously, it's not up to date what's happening right now, and it's saying, hey, based on what I know, it's adjusting, and so on and so forth. Now, if I'll say use tools, what will happen now, you have like a small search in web happening. So large language model knows this question is about something actual, which it doesn't have knowledge to, so it tries to reach for help. And it uses this web search as a tool to maybe refresh or enrich its knowledge. So now it goes to the web, it found information about who is the Prime Minister, which was like a recent change of March 14th, it's a mark, and now you have much more grounded and trustful answer compared to fabrication saying, hey, this is Justin because I just didn't know what to say anything better. So exactly the same approach we can use in Business Central to make sure we can answer the question about business data in a trustful and reliable way. So let's see how it works. Imagine you're building a Copilot extension to help your users to answer a question about orders. And of course, all the information about orders is kind of stored in Business Central. So what you can do in your extension, you can define a tool. Exactly the same tool as a web search was for ChatGPT. You go to our L code, you define a function or a tool, and you say, hey, I know everything about orders. So in this case, when the user asks, what is my order status, we can call your code unit, which will be responsible for that. It will retrieve all the information from database about status, delivery, updates, tracking, and get this data back to LLM. And now we can respond like, hey, your order is currently out of delivery, here's the new expected date, and so on and so forth. So again, without having these tools, we would never be able to get any good response for the users. But because we can delegate to Business Central, to your extension, to do the work, we can enrich response with the real data. Let's take another example. Now, sometimes you can say, OK, but what about if I ask for the order, I think it's delayed, and I'll ask for a discount? We can also approach it in the same way. We're going to define a number of tools, a number of code units, a number of helpers who can help you to do different things. For example, you have a helper who knows everything about order status. Or you have a helper which can help you to retrieve product details about the product. Or you have a helper, based on API maybe, which allow you to apply the discounts. So in this case, when you run this prompt to large language model can detect tools defined in your extension and call them where it's applicable and basically use that information and to provide responses like that. Yes, your order is unfortunately delayed. We're very sorry about that. And yes, because of your business logic, we did apply a discount for your order. Sorry for inconvenience. So tools allow you to have this verified way to get a data, inject a real-time data, and avoid fabrication and hallucination in the real world. Now, what usually happens at this point of time, people saying, wait a minute, do you have a power now? So what about if I ask about the order, and I ask for discount, and I ask to book a meeting, and I ask to check a stock price, and so on, so on, so forth? Couldn't I just go to my extension and add a lot of functions? Functions which can do all things in the world, get a report, schedule meetings, analyze customer sentiment, and basically define as much action tools which describe my extension, and then just ask LLM to deal with all of that. And the truth is, at this point of time, what will happen is that it'll basically stop working. So the concept is great and it worked great, but at some point of time, if you have too much, it will just stop working reliably. Now, what I want you to be cautious and be super aware, if you go to OpenAI documentation, it will say, hey, tools are awesome. It's the best tool for a job to retrieve data from a system, to enrich your responses, to make sure it's truth and grounded. But please use fewer than 20 functions to make sure you have a good accuracy. From our experimentation, or if you look at Microsoft features, we use around five-ish, and we see pretty good results. So we would suggest you stay around 5-ish, but obviously as the technology improves, as large language model will improve, probably that number will grow over time. And by the way, we have samples. If you go to our BC Tech, you can see a number of samples, how to use tools, how to bring tools to a Copilot extension. We keep them up to date with every release and every wave. It's a great place to get started. Go ahead and explore all that. Using tools. So using tools help your Copilot to deal with fabrication. In Business Central AI Toolkit, we support multiple function calling, small thing but important. Our recommendation, you try to build a very specific Copilot. You can build a Copilot to help out with user pricing, about order status. But if you want to build it like a God Copilot which can help you with everything, you probably don't have enough technology for now to deal with that. So you want to stay humble and smaller. Because if you have too many tools, we just don't have enough reliable technology, and large language model not really sure which one to call, and it kind of can put your Copilot extension off track a bit. And from our experience, the magic number is around 5. But again, try it out, experiment, see what works for you. Over the last releases and this release, we have a number of great videos how to extend Copilot in Business Central and how to build your own Copilot. I hope this video was helpful. You have something to think about on this journey. And with that, I wish you a wonderful day.